Good afternoon. Today is July 25 and I have the pleasure to be here with Betty Alice Erickson. And in this opportunity we are going to talk about Erickson talking about Erickson. So welcome to Chile.
Thank you very much. I am delighted to be here.
Thank you, Betty Alice. In this opportunity I would like to ask you how the work of your dad has influenced what you have been doing in your life.
That is such a gigantic topic because Daddy's way of teaching and working influenced me enormously. He began using me as a hypnotic demonstration subject when I was less than 10 when I was 10 years old.
Really?
Just bare,
What happened there? That would be nice to know it.
My mother did not like this particular student.
Okay.
And so Daddy asked her to demonstrate hypnosis, and she said no, she didn't particularly like that student.
Okay.
So Daddy came and he said, would you like to demonstrate hypnosis? And I said, I'd love to. So he called me in, he demonstrated a hypnotic trance, and then he had this student practice on me. And from that moment on, I was hooked into hypnosis. Now, he had used me, or he had used hypnosis on me from the time I was a little girl.
10 years?
No, way before then he had done hypnosis.
Oh, okay.
He played hypnotic games with me
Okay.
so that he could induce a trance without me, just as a part of interactions. He told me stories, and stories are a wonderful way to induce trance.
Okay.
And then as I grew up, he would always listen to me and talk to me. If I ever wanted to know something, he would always tell me. And I continued to demonstrate hypnosis for his students, his patients. He founded ASH, and while he was founding ASH, he and his colleagues, I was the demonstration subject.
And what about your mom?
My mother was glad to relinquish that responsibility.
Okay.
Because Mama had been the primary demonstration subject, and she had a family. I have 7 brothers and sisters that she raised, and she had other stuff to do besides this. So she continued to be his subject, but she was happy to turn it over to me, and I was happy to take it.
Yeah.
And then as I grew up, I became a special ed teacher for emotionally disturbed children, adolescents. And Daddy I can't tell you how much I consulted with him about my disturbed adolescence.
And when you were talking to your dad, did he give you direct messages or advice, or just more stories?
Daddy did not hesitate to give absolutely direct messages.
Okay.
He also was a total master at setting it up. This is the heart of Erickson's work. The setup, and then blink, and the person makes the next step.
Okay.
There's nobody to resist, nothing to resist against, and it's all my information.
Okay.
He was a master.
Strategy mind.
Yes,
Yeah.
It's a perfect one.
And how was that kind of work influencing you?
Well, it taught me first and foremost, how effective it is.
Yeah.
And when I'm a psychotherapist now, so I try very hard to use that with my clients because it works so beautifully.
Uh-huh.
He also would never ceased using conversational trance with me. And I believe that is an extraordinary, powerful tool, not just a tool for therapy, but for connection.
Yeah.
And Daddy was, I can't tell you in how many ways he would use this ability to connect and to heal, and to heal problems before they even existed, which I think is a master.
Interesting. And you mentioned before about a setup. How that was planned? Do you know?
Do you want me to give you a short example?
Yeah, that would be nice.
When I was teaching with delinquent adolescents,
Uh-huh.
and it was before email, and I wrote Daddy many letters, and he told me many strategies, and I had a young man who was 17 who was absolutely a sociopath, absolutely, no doubt.
Okay.
But I wasn't afraid of him, and I was the only thing between him and prison, okay?
Wow. Okay.
And everybody would say, aren't your to my other employees, aren't you afraid of this man, this boy, Bobby his name was? And they'd say, no, we'll hide behind Betty Alice because he will not hurt Betty Alice. And so I went home and I said, okay, Daddy, I know he would never hurt me. I know he was a sociopath. I know he was. I know he will never hurt me. I know he loves me. I know. Now what am I missing? And Daddy just said, of course he would never hurt you. Of course. He loved you. You knew it. He knew it. You had a special connection. Okay, that's...
Okay.
And then he said, Bobby would never hurt you. He would hire it done.
Okay.
Okay, and I thought, of course, he would hire it done.
Okay.
And all my confusion was completely settled.
Okay. But how could he have that kind of intuition just because you told that story?
Because, well, he knew me. He
He
believed that this young man, he really was a psychopath. And Daddy spent one entire year completely paralyzed. And he was in his house at age 17 and 18, completely paralyzed, and he had to learn. He had nothing to do but think, to get in touch with his unconscious so that he could learn how to move again, because that was the beginning of his understanding of neuroplasticity and of the mind-body connection.
Mm-hmm.
Because he remembered how it felt to move and then learned how. But also...
Incredible.
I know, it's unbelievable.
That's incredible. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
But he did it.
And he also learned how to listen to people in the other room, how to hear people on a different level, how to understand what they were really saying regardless of their words, their voices, their inflections, but to really understand. And he'd play a game. How quickly could he figure it out?
Looks like a kind of child spirit.
He always had a child spirit. He believed that the unconscious, that the normal state of human beings is that of a small young child, happy, cheerful, friendly, curious, loving, all those wonderful adjectives. And we have to be civilized and learn how to stand in line. But if we lose touch with that child, we are not who we really want to be. And he made great effort to teach that to people, to demonstrate it, and to make sure that certainly I knew that pleasure in life can be found in the sky, in the leaf of a tree.
Yeah. In my perspective, and I have been studying here that work for many, many years, and there is always there the paradox of the simplicity and the complexity.
Exactly.
And it's very Eastern.
Yes.
Yeah, because at the same time, but at the same time it's very Western. And it looks like this kind of, how to say, country man, a wise countryman.
A wise country doctor.
A wise country doctor.
Who knew how to heal his patients, who knew the power of connection.
Yeah. So, do you believe that everything is related to the power of connection, and from that side you start building up
I
the work?
believe that an enormous amount of it is built on connection. Daddy could make his patients do amazing things, and it was because I used to describe it that he had a pile of love here, and he would say, without words, that here it is, my pleasure isn't finished in the offering, it doesn't matter, my pleasure is an offering.
Yeah, it's a nice metaphor.
And it is irresistible, because he genuinely was finished with his pleasure by offering.
Uh-huh. Was he seeing strategic therapy just up front, or that was a consequence of the connection?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Was he thinking on or moving on in this flow, believing that the strategic therapy was needed, or that was a part of the connection, just that?
I've never been asked that before.
Uh-huh.
And I think my first thought is that Daddy viewed not all, but a huge number of problems as incorrect or unfinished or learning. That most of our problems come from incorrect learning. And he took joy in setting up a broader field, arena, so that you could choose to finish or correct your learning.
Uh-huh.
And the hard part of that, certainly for me, is to trust that of course you're going to in your time and in your way.
Uh-huh. It's very interesting. And you didn't mention in the beginning, when we were talking previously, that Milton Erickson was quite different in his youth than afterwards, when he was mostly known by NLPers and a lot of the new hypnosis gurus generation.
Right.
What is the difference?
I think the difference is that when Daddy was younger, he had the luxury of being more forceful, more direct, more dynamic.
Really?
Uh-huh.
More forceful, direct, and dynamic.
Now, he always was.
Uh-huh.
Even in the last, he was in a wheelchair for 10 years.
Yeah.
And he became quite physically frail, and he was in a lot of pain for a great deal of that time. But when he was younger, he was a scary figure.
Really? You're talking like a daughter?
No.
With that big image?
No. Yeah. But I would have people say, your father is very scary. And I'd look at him, squint my eyes and look at him. And not just my friends,
Okay.
and certainly boyfriends.
Wow. That would be nice to see your boyfriends meeting Milton Erickson.
But the patients, because the office was in our house, so we got to meet the last 20, 25 years of his life. We got to meet a lot of his patients. And they would even tell me that he was very scary. And even as a girl, I remember thinking, the only reason he's scary is because he knows you.
Oh, okay.
I remember thinking that.
He knows. Oh, that's good. That's good. Because I was just going to ask you, what makes him scary for other people? Yeah, that's.
I think a lot of people, okay, let me back up. I think with his patients, he could always have a gentler persona.
Okay.
Until it was time to not have a gentler persona.
That could be scary. You're right.
But I think in his older years, because he was tired and in a wheelchair, I'm so glad he had the students, and the students have done a magnificent job promoting his work around the world.
Yes.
Jeffrey Zeig, Steve Gilligan, Steve Langton, and without them, particularly Jeff, there would be no Ericksonian movement.
Okay.
So, but all of them, except Jay Haley, knew him when he was in a wheelchair, and they have focused on his metaphorical approach. Now, he was always metaphorical, but sometimes he really wasn't.
Yeah.
And that's a more balanced picture of him.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I think Ericksonian work, and that includes you, it's well known because of the indirective communication, metaphorical communication. It's not so well known about directive communication, forceful communication.
I know,
Yeah.
it's not so well known.
Yes, it's
But
very interesting, this perspective. Yeah. And how that, this new angle of your father, do you think appeared in a session with his patient?
You mean early on, or you mean all along?
Early on.
I think early on he was in. You look at somebody, what do they want? Sometimes people want to be told what to do, or they want clarity, crystal clarity.
Right.
And sometimes you just they want it to be offered to them so they can pick and choose. And I think he had more of that option when he was younger. I think in his older years he became even more skillful at metaphors and indirect, because that's essentially what he did then.
Okay.
Even more skilled.
Okay. Just oriented to that problem, or was already sitting strategically?
No. That's part of his genius.
Okay.
He could talk to a group of people and make it so direct yet so indirect that they all thought he was speaking directly to them. And that, to me, is a piece of his genius.
Yes. It's quite hard to try to deconstruct what he was doing.
I think we can this is my opinion, I think we can deconstruct some of it.
Yeah.
I think all of us can be better for studying the way he did his work. But I believe Daddy was a genius, and genius cannot be replicated.
That's right. That's
you
right.
are or you're not.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
we're smart, but
sometimes, not all the time.
Few
Few times.
okay, a few times.
Few
I agree.
times.
But I think geniuses are different.
Are different.
Mhm.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's our challenge as teachers. Try to deconstruct your father learnings. But there's another paradox, because the paradox in my perspective is that he has no rules, and that was the rule.
No, it has no rules. And that is an absolute important part.
And that's a rule.
That is the rule.
That is the rule. So how you can teach that?
Well, because you have to teach people to be flexible, to look at people, to understand themes and concepts,
That's right.
and that everybody's an individual. Because you can't have a rule of psychotherapy that applies to everyone.
And that's very true. And maybe that's part of the problem and not the solution. Try to use and look after schemes, solutions as recipes.
And it makes it easier for us.
Yes, but not maybe for the patient.
I
That's
think
right. Yeah.
absolutely not for the patient, because each one of us is totally individualistic.
Mm-hmm.
So that, I think, was a piece of how he changed a lot of psychotherapy forever.
That's right. Betty Alice, you are first generation
Yes.
of your father's work.
Yes,
Milton
I
Erickson.
got it directly from Betty.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and not just that, in terms of work, you received his wisdom
Yes.
as a child.
I was very lucky.
Yeah.
Very lucky.
Yeah, we envy you on that. We would like to be Erickson too, but we are not. So, how would you continue developing his legacy?
I think that the more you read about how he worked, I know that every time I read a case study or I see a good film of Daddy's, I say, oh, I never saw that before. And as long as we continue to learn, I think that's the best way. Daddy said, I asked him once, you know, what's the best thing for a lot of things? And he told me that the only instantly renewable pleasure in life is learning. And I think that is I think that's simple but profound.
Yeah, it's simple and profound. That's true.
So that's what we have to do. Because I know Daddy learned from his patients. I learned from mine. I'm sure you do from your clients, same as I do.
Yeah.
And then we get better.
Yeah, it is an ongoing process.
Exactly.
It never ends.
But then you can't have rule 1, 2, and 3.
That's right. That's right. If you can let us with a message for people that is going to watch this recording, what would you like to tell them?
I would like to tell them to learn, to have fun while you learned, and to pass it on. Because that's the biggest pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay.
I thank you very much being here.
Thank you.
Thank you
I
from
appreciate
my heart. I love it making connection with you. And thank you for trusting us and being here in Chile, helping our people.
Thank you for having me, Paul.
Thank
Very
you.
much.
Thank you.